Picture this, an 80-year-old man, weathered hands gripping the handlebars of an old bicycle, pedaling slowly down a quiet street. The sun catches the deep lines on his face, each one telling a story of decades lived, battles fought, and sacrifices made. But to the young police officer approaching him, he's just another obstacle in his day. Before we dive into this incredible story that will leave you speechless, I want you to do something for me. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers from all over the world. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button because stories like this one deserve to be heard. It was a Tuesday morning in small-town America. The kind of morning where the air still held a hint of yesterday's rain and the streets were just beginning to stir with life. Harold Mitchell, 80 years old, had been making this same bike ride for the past 3 years. Every Tuesday and Thursday, rain or shine, he would carefully mount his old Schwinn bicycle and pedal the 2 miles to the local Veterans Affairs office. Harold wasn't riding for exercise, though his doctor had recommended it. He wasn't riding for pleasure, though he found peace in the gentle rhythm of the wheels against pavement. Harold was riding because his truck had been repossessed 6 months ago when his medical bills became too overwhelming, and this bicycle was his only means of transportation. The bike itself told a story. Paint chipped and faded, with a small American flag zip-tied to the back, fluttering proudly despite its frayed edges. The basket in front held his military identification, some paperwork, and a thermos of coffee that his neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, insisted on filling for him each morning. Officer Jake Morrison, 26 years old and 2 years on the force, was having what he would later describe as one of those days. 3 traffic stops that morning had yielded nothing but attitude from drivers. His sergeant had been on his case about quotas, and his girlfriend had been texting him non-stop about wedding plans he couldn't afford. When he spotted the elderly man wobbling slowly on his bicycle, taking up more of the lane than Jake thought appropriate, his patience finally snapped. Harold was riding exactly as he always did, staying as far right as possible while still maintaining his balance. At 80, with arthritis in both knees and hands that trembled slightly from old shrapnel wounds, maintaining perfect balance wasn't as simple as it once had been. But he rode with dignity, his back straight despite the pain, his eyes focused on the road ahead. Jake pulled his patrol car alongside Harold and rolled down his window. "Hey, old-timer, you need to get that thing on the sidewalk. You're holding up traffic." Harold turned his head slightly, his hearing not what it used to be. "I'm sorry, officer. I'm staying as far right as I can. The sidewalk has construction barriers up ahead." "I don't care about construction," Jake snapped, his voice rising. "You're impeding traffic. Get on the sidewalk or get off the road." What Jake didn't see, but what several bystanders were beginning to notice, was the small crowd gathering. Maria Santos was walking her dog when she stopped to watch. Tom Bradley was getting his mail when he noticed the commotion. And crucially, 17-year-old Ashley Kim was waiting for her school bus, her phone already in her hand. Harold tried to explain again, his voice calm and respectful. "Officer, I understand your concern, but I'm following traffic laws. I have every right to use this lane, and the sidewalk isn't safe with the construction." That's when Jake's day, his frustration, and his complete lack of understanding collided into a moment that would change everything. He threw his patrol car into park, stepped out, and approached Harold with the kind of aggressive energy that had been building all morning. "Don't lecture me about traffic laws, old man. When I tell you to move, you move." Harold stopped his bicycle and placed one foot on the ground to steady himself. Even now, even faced with this young officer's anger, his military training kicked in. Remain calm. Assess the situation. De-escalate when possible. "Officer, I served this country for 35 years. I understand authority and I respect it. But I also know my rights as a citizen. I'm not doing anything wrong." Those words, meant to build a bridge of understanding, instead became the spark that ignited Jake's rage. In his mind, this old man was now not just impeding traffic but challenging his authority, lecturing him about service and rights. What happened next lasted only seconds but would be replayed millions of times across social media, news networks, and in the nightmares of everyone who witnessed it. Jake stepped forward, placed both hands on Harold's chest, and shoved him with enough force to send the elderly man tumbling backward off his bicycle onto the unforgiving asphalt. Harold hit the ground hard. The sound of his body meeting the pavement was sickeningly clear to everyone watching. His thermos rolled across the street, coffee spilling out like blood from a wound. His paperwork scattered in the morning breeze, and that small American flag, still attached to his bike, waved frantically as if in distress. But Harold didn't cry out. He didn't curse or threaten. As he lay there, trying to catch his breath, trying to assess whether anything was broken, he looked up at Jake with eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by cruelty, but still held disappointment in humanity's capacity for unnecessary harm. Ashley Kim's phone captured every second. The push, the fall, Harold's quiet dignity even as he lay injured on the ground, and Jake's immediate realization that he had just made a catastrophic mistake. Within minutes, the video was uploaded to TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram with a simple caption, "Cop pushes 80-year-old man off bike for no reason." The response was immediate and explosive. The video was shared thousands of times within the first hour. Comments poured in expressing outrage, disbelief, and demands for justice. But it was what happened next that no one could have predicted. Marcus Thompson, a local veteran who had been following the story online, recognized something in Harold's face. A bearing, a look, something familiar. He made a phone call to his old commander, who made a phone call to his contact at the Pentagon, who accessed military records that hadn't been reviewed in decades. Harold Mitchell wasn't just any 80-year-old man. He was retired General Harold Mitchell, recipient of the Purple Heart, the Bronze Star, the Silver Star, and the Distinguished Service Cross. He had led special operations in Vietnam, commanded rescue missions in Grenada, and spent his final years in service training the next generation of military leaders. More importantly, and unknown to almost everyone in his small town, Harold had lived quietly in near poverty for the past several years. His wife's medical bills before her death had consumed their savings. Pride had prevented him from seeking help from veteran services until recently, and bureaucracy had delayed his benefits. The man who had once commanded thousands of soldiers now rode a bicycle to appointments because he couldn't afford car payments. The military community moves quickly when one of their own is in trouble. Within hours of Harold's identity being confirmed, the phone calls began. Active duty personnel stationed nearby requested permission to respond. Veteran organizations in 3 states organized caravans. The local VFW Post, American Legion, and Marine Corps League issued a joint statement and began mobilizing their members. By evening, as Harold was being treated at the local hospital for bruised ribs and a sprained wrist, refusing to press charges because that young man made a mistake, and we all make mistakes, the first military vehicles began arriving in town. They came from everywhere. A convoy of veterans from the next state over, driving through the night. Active duty personnel on leave who changed their plans. Military families who had heard the story and felt compelled to show support. Local veterans who had never met Harold but understood exactly what his service meant. The next morning, as Jake reported for duty knowing his career was likely over, he found the police station surrounded. Not by an angry mob, but by a silent, respectful gathering of men and women in uniform and veterans wearing their service organization caps and jackets. They had come to check on Harold, to make sure he was okay, and to remind everyone watching that respect isn't just about following orders, it's about recognizing the sacrifices that came before us. Harold, released from the hospital that morning, was overwhelmed by the response. These strangers, these brothers and sisters in arms he had never met, had driven hundreds of miles simply to honor his service and dignity. The scene outside the hospital was unlike anything the small town had ever witnessed. Veterans of every age, from every branch of service, standing quietly in formation. Not protesting, not demanding vengeance, but simply present. Their message was clear without a single word being spoken. When Harold finally emerged from the hospital, the crowd didn't cheer or applaud. They came to attention. Hundreds of veterans, standing at attention for a man who had given his life to service and asked for nothing in return. Jake Morrison, watching from his patrol car, finally understood what he had done. He hadn't just pushed an elderly man off a bicycle. He had assaulted a symbol of everything that allowed him to wear his badge, to serve his community, to live freely in a nation protected by people like Harold Mitchell. The story that began with a moment of unnecessary aggression became a nationwide conversation about respect, dignity, and how we treat our elders and veterans. Harold never sought publicity or revenge. He simply wanted to continue his quiet life, riding his bicycle to appointments, living with dignity despite his struggles. But the country wouldn't let his story fade. Donations poured in from across the nation. A local car dealership gifted him a reliable vehicle. The Veterans Affairs Office expedited his benefits. And Jake Morrison, after resigning from the police force, spent the following months volunteering at veteran service organizations, trying to understand and atone for his actions. The most powerful moment came weeks later, during a town hall meeting where Jake publicly apologized to Harold. The elderly veteran listened patiently, then stood slowly and extended his hand. "Son," he said, "we all make mistakes. What matters is what we do after we make them." This story reminds us that every person we meet carries a history we may never know. The elderly man struggling with his groceries might be a former teacher who shaped generations. The quiet woman at the bus stop might be a nurse who saved countless lives. And the old man on the bicycle might be a general who once stood between freedom and tyranny. Harold Mitchell never asked to be a hero twice in his lifetime. But sometimes, heroism isn't about what you do, it's about how you handle what's done to you. His grace under pressure, his refusal to seek revenge, and his quiet dignity in the face of humiliation reminded an entire nation of what true strength looks like. In a world that often seems divided, Harold's story became a bridge. Veterans and civilians, young and old, came together around a simple truth. Respect isn't earned through fear or force, but through recognizing the humanity and sacrifice in others. As Jake Morrison learned that day, you didn't just push an old man, you pushed a symbol of everything that lets you wear that badge today. The video that started as documentation of injustice became a reminder of justice. Not the kind delivered through courts or punishment, but the justice that comes when a community stands up for what's right, when strangers become family, and when respect is finally given where it was always due. If this story moved you, if it reminded you to look twice at the people around you, to consider the stories they carry and the struggles they face, then don't forget to subscribe. Stories like Harold's need to be told, shared, and remembered. Because in the end, we're all just people trying to make our way through life with dignity, hoping someone will notice when we need help, and grateful when respect is given freely rather than demanded forcefully.